1, 2, 3, 4.
All right, and welcome back to It's Not a Sport, Season 3, Episode 12. We got a good episode for you this week. I'm giving you my review on The Last of Us Part 2, my thoughts on it, what I enjoyed, what I didn't like, and whether you should pick up the game or not. We also got esports as always. Not a whole lot of news to cover this week. Nothing really happened. It was 4th of July weekend, so everyone's a holiday and everyone's just kind of chilling. So not a whole lot of news to look forward to, but some really interesting esports games at least happened on the League of Legends side. And then we're going to talk about games that are coming out later on this week. And as always, make sure to leave a like, a comment, really helps me out. Follow us on our Instagram, It's Not a Sport. To you, check out our website and all of the above. So anyway, let's get right into esports as we always do, starting with the LPL in League of Legends. We have Top Esports in first. Then Victory 5 and JD are tied for second. Team WE is fourth. Fun Plus Phoenix is fifth. Invictus and Sunning are tied for sixth. We have LGD Gaming in eighth. Royals Never Give Up in ninth. Vinci in 10th. 11th is Oh My God. 12th is Edward Gaming, and 13 Billy B Gaming, and in 14th place, tied for 14th, is eStar LNG Esports. 16th and is Dominus Esports, and then in last place is the Rogue Warriors. I always forget that LPL, it's a lot more teams than the other leagues do. In LCK, Korea, we have Dragon X in first, followed by Damwon in second. Tied for third is Genji, T1, and a Freak of Freaks. Then we have Team Dynamic in sixth, KT roster in seventh, Sandbox Gaming and Soul Hell 1 Prince in eighth, and Hanwha Life Esports in the last place being 10th. In LEC, we have Rogue and Mad Lions tied for first. We have G2 and Misfits tied for third. We have SK Gaming, Origins, XL, Fnatic, and Team Vitality all in fifth. And Skalak 04 is in last. In North America, we have Cloud9 in first, being 8-0, followed by TSM and Team Liquid in second. Evil Geniuses and FlyQuest in fourth. COG in sixth. Golden Guardians in seventh. The 100 Thieves in eighth. Immortals in ninth. And Dignitas being last place in 10th, 0-8. A lot of the games this week I watched them were very spicy, very close. You know, if you just want exciting bad games, then that's an A for you. In the Overwatch League, we have Shanghai Dragons in first, followed by Philly, then Guangzhou Chargers, San Francisco, New York, Paris, Florida Mayhem, Los Angeles Valiant, Seoul Dynasty, Atlanta, Hangzhou, Los Angeles Gladiators, London, Houston, Toronto, Dallas, Vancouver, Chengdu, Washington, and Boston is in last place. For games coming out this week to look forward to, we have Code Cross coming out, Elden Path of the Forgotten, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon 2, Deadly Promotion 2, A Blessing in Disguise for the Switch, F1 2020 for the PlayStation, Xbox One, Stadia, and PC, and NASCAR Heat 5 for the same consoles as well on July 10th. An SAO game on the 10th as well. We have the Death Stranding coming to PC. On July 14th. So that's something to look forward to if you were looking forward to that game on PC. We have Hunting Simulator 2, and then the biggest release for this month, Ghost of Tsushima, comes out July 17th. So we have that to kind of look forward to until we get into next month. in terms of news, and I'm just going to brief over this quickly because I think it's something that is noteworthy. There's been a lot of drama going on in the Smash community, mostly a lot of sexual assault allegations. It's going through kind of a Me Too movement at the current point in time. A lot of pro players, got caught doing inappropriate things. So it's nothing. It's a very complicated, I guess, situation. It's very sad to see such a game that's meant for children and meant to be fun and a party game, and then the competitive scene kind of seeing these allegations go through. So it's just something that I want to bring to you guys' attention that's going on right now, because it is always a sad and complicated subject to conquer. So with that being said, we're going to get into the main talk, which is, of course, our Last of Us 2 review. I hope you enjoy it. I hope I point out some really cool points if you have played the game or if you haven't played the game. Spoilers alert, there will be spoilers in this review. So look forward to it. I think it's going to be juicy. I think I really covered a lot of bases, and it's going to be a good one. So let's get into that now. Okay, let's talk about The Last of Us Part 2. So this is my review for it. If you didn't listen to last week's episode, I did a tiny review, and I'm just going to repeat the same thing that I did and tell you my overall score and why I rated it at that score, and then just a little recap at the end. That's going to be the flow of this talk. So first off, it's a good game. It's worth the $60. If you want to have a fun experience and you have $60 to spare, The Last of Us Part 2 is worth the $60. It does live up to that. It's worth the money. It's worth the investment. It is a good game. However, it does have mass flaws, and the feedback that it's been receiving on the player side is valid, and multiple arguments that people have about the game is also valid in my eyes. It's a very complicated subject because the game strives to do something that I don't think any game has, and it fails in my opinion. So first off, that's why the score that I give it is a 6 out of 10. So first off, I'm going to talk about kind of false advertisement. And this may be starting off on a negative note, which I don't really want to talk about, but I think it's something to be aware of when looking at this game. I was lucky enough to avoid a lot of the spoilers. I didn't watch every single trailer, but I saw a lot of them, and I did see like the E3 trailer when they first announced the game. A lot of those content and the trailers that they show is only about maybe 40% of the game total. It's a lot of false advertisement, and I think you could kind of make a case in court of it being false advertisement, because a lot of the stuff that they show in the trailer is there, but a lot of stuff that they don't show is when it becomes kind of problematic, and we'll get to that a little bit later. So just be worried that when you're looking at these trailers of The Last of Us Part 2, that's what you're going to get to a degree. It's not the full experience. So with that, we're going to get into a little bit more lighter note. I guess that was just kind of the warning section of the review. And the first part being gameplay. So the mechanics. The mechanics of the game are pretty much the same as the first Last of Us. If you played the first Last of Us and you like, the pillars of sneaking around, crafting, and collecting, kind of survival horror-ish, that's still there. It's definitely still there. I think that they didn't really do a whole lot to improve the mechanics. They're relatively simple and relatively the same as the first one. They did just switch some around. So, like, for example, like, and this is going to be spoilers, of course, because in that last week was not a spoiler review, so be prepared from here on out. We're just going to talk about spoilers. For instance, like on Ellie, when you play as Ellie, you don't have to craft shanks. Like in the original game, when you played as Joel, you had to craft shanks in order to kill clickers and do multiple things in the game. But in this game, as Ellie, you don't have to craft shanks. But then when you move over to Abby, who we were talking about a little bit later, she does have to craft shanks. So like they moved some mechanics around like that with crafting, and then they just built upon stealth mechanics where it's a little bit more just MGS-y, where like now you can crawl, your way down. You can get down. You can crawl. You can like stuff like that. They just improved the stealth mechanics a little bit more than they were in the first game, but really it's nothing revolutionary. It's nothing big. We've kind of, once you've seen it, you all seen it again. Nothing truly new. I think where like these mechanics really come to light and improve, which is in the level design, because you can crouch under things and you can slip through cracks seamlessly in the levels. It makes the mechanics feel a little bit more fresh and a little bit more new, because you can now maneuver between within the play space a lot better than you could in the original game. And that's where I saw a lot of the improvements were in aspects like that, where you could hide in tall grass or slip through a crack in the building and stuff like that. That's where the improvements in the gameplay and the mechanics overall saw a huge uptick. However, the level design does have a lot of negative factors for me. The first one being that it's very confusing to figure out where you want to, or where you're supposed to go and where you want to go. You'll eventually find it, and yes, there is a waypoint marker that you can do, but this play space is very open, and it's like, and everything kind of looks the same. There's no like indicators. For example, if you play God of War 2018, the most recent God of War, whenever there's something to climb on, they have these little like runic markers to indicate that, hey, you can climb on that. They're very subtle and you don't always see it, but it's there to let the player know that this is the direction that they can go or should go. Last of Us Part 2 doesn't have that. The levels design is very big. It's very nice, but it's because of that, it's just extremely confusing on like, where am I supposed to go? And I got lost multiple times between the level. So that's kind of the downside to the level design. The other weird thing that I just want to note when it comes to level design, because mostly it's solid besides that, just like it being confusing on where to go, is that the game opens, right? In the first, like, maybe after the first 2 hours, when you're in the first 5-6 hours of the game, you, after the prologue, the first real chapter, I would say, you get introduced into this open world, semi-open world play space. And you can see it, they show this kind of off a lot in like trailers. When they did the 25-minute gameplay trailer, that was kind of what they were showing off, is that open play space, because a lot of games like to show the first couple minutes of their games or hours of their games as media and marketing, which is the smart move. Movies do that too. So you get into this open world play space, and then after that, it goes back to a very linear level design that Naughty Dog's known for. It's very awkward decision making that they decided to do this open world play space that is like semi-open world that you can like go explore stuff, and then everything got really linear after that. So I just wanted to keep just throw that out there. It doesn't really mean a whole lot to the review and the overall score. It's just a very interesting decision when it comes to game design that they decided to do this. I think that was more just to show off, like, there's multiple couple aspects in the game that shows off the power of the PlayStation 4 that they weren't able to do in the original game, and like this was just one of those instances, which we'll talk about a little bit more with the technology exploit. So next I want to talk about AI of the game. The AI is very hit or miss. Mostly with zombie AI, it is miss. It is not as the zombie AI is really kind of dumb. They don't You can kind of funnel them into a corner most of the time with most encounters, and they just kind of run at you, and you just kind of shoot them dead. It's not really worth stealth killing them, and that's mostly due to level design. Again, this is why I kind of put these two together, as they flow into each other. If you played the original Last of Us, the first one, when it came to the end game and the end encounters, they got really difficult just because how the encounters were and the levels were designed. It comes to know, like in my mind with the previous Last of Us, when you get to the part where you have to go under the underground tunnel and it's flooded, and there's like 3 big bloater zombies which only show up twice within this game, and there's the tons of clickers that you have to deal with, and there's like clickers watching clickers, or a clicker will be somewhere, but then a normal zombie will be watching that clicker, so you have to figure out, how am I supposed to do this? Or when you get to the college and you're in tight enclosed spaces with the 2 big bloater zombies, or the 2 big super zombies, you have to figure out how to deal with that, and that's difficult. That's where the difficulty came. And the AI kind of like, you have to kind of stealth your way through the AI in the first Last of Us, especially in the final level with all those masked up super dudes that start showing up, the armed military dudes, fireflies. Like, that was difficult. In this game, that level of difficulty and that level of design is missing a lot. It's not there. The zombie, you never get those zombie encounters where you have to be very you have to think about your approach in the way that there's so many clickers and so many big bloating zombies, that how will I tackle these? That's not there, and that level of difficulty is very missing in Last of Us Part 2, which is I think that's just a part of modern game design, as we see. Like, if you go back and play old retro games, they're a lot more difficult than current games and modern games. So I think that's just how this like modern game design has developed, which is sad, because those encounters, I didn't have to switch the difficulty in hard to have a challenge, just because of how those encounters were designed. The human AI on in The Last of Us Part 2 is kind of, I think, a little overpowered. I think it's very hard. It's good. Like, I think they're very smart. They're very nice. They'll call out their dead person's name. Sometimes if you run up on them, they'll react, and other times they won't. So like, that part of the AI is really cool. If you shoot an arrow from some direction, they'll see it and they'll call it out to everyone. So that part of the AI is really cool. If they don't know you're there, they have like a set path, which is kind of not too not good. Like, it's very predictable. You can see what path they'll walk if you just scout them out for a while, and then you could take them down. And most of the human AI encounters, like, there's dogs, and like, you're forced to kind of kill the dogs. You don't have to, but you, for easier time, you will. And we'll kind of talk about that argument later, because there's an argument about that came up that's kind of interesting. But like, you have to deal with those, and you have to deal with those side encounters, and then everyone will react. So the human AI is very interesting. Again, that's where I say it's very hit or miss, but the zombie AI is pretty bad. So you will have a challenge when you're fighting humans, I think. But like, once you kind of get the gameplay loop and down, like by the end of the game, I was just, army crawling my way across the entire play level, and the human AI was just couldn't really see you, and they wouldn't really react. So there's hit or miss. Tech wise, I'm always amazed by the Naughty Dog engine. I think it was really good in the last, not the Uncharted 4. A good example of this is rope physics, but we also saw it multiple times in the Last of Us Part 2, where they just have tons and tons of zombies on screen. And it was only like 3 instances of this, but so many that like the player is forced to run, like you can't fight all those. And it's really well like designed where like, oh, that's the power of the PlayStation 4. You can see, that's like something that they couldn't do on the PS3 that they can now do on the PlayStation 4. Have that many bodies on screen, and have that experience where a zombie horde is chasing after the player. And those are some of my favorite parts of the game. I really love those. The rope physics, are fantastic, and the level of accessibility and options that they put into the game as well are incredible. Like I was actually surprised on how many levels were in this, like of accessibility were in this game, because it was almost like I was playing a PC game where I have those type of options, where I had this options in the console game. So really tops on them were the engine and the tech part of it was really good for this game. I didn't encounter a lot of bugs. I did get a lot of pixel glitches every once in a while. I don't know if that's just a byproduct of my PlayStation being old. I'm playing on the OG PS4. Other than that, I did get parts where I was playing as Abby and I fell out of the world one time and died instantly. That was my only real like buggy mess glitch. So like other than that, the game ran really smoothly. The graphics looked really nice, really cool. The audio was really nice, really cool, like superb sound design. And the environments were really nicely textured, and the lighting was fantastic. They did a really good job on the technical side of things. Now, let's get into the meat and potatoes, when everything kind of starts to fall apart for The Last of Us Part 2. That being the story. Okay. I want to put this out there because I really like this idea of the story not being about revenge, but being about forgiveness. This story, The Last of Us Part 2, is a story about forgiveness. It's supposed to be as Ellie was trying to forgive Joel for what he did to her at the end of the first game, and now Ellie is, reminded of, her struggles with Joel and trying to forgive him, and she forgives Abby at the end of the game. Spoiler alert. Again, I said spoilers from now on. So I like the idea about the game being about forgiveness, but let's talk about the first big major action of the game, and that was being Joel's death. Joel's death was valid to me. I like Joel's death. Joel's death was a great motivation to kick off the story, to kick off the game. It was the entire reason why this game, existed, as a sequel. It was because of Joel's death. Joel's death is, you're supposed to feel sad and emotional with it, and you do. That's the protagonist. I want to say the hero. He's not the hero of the first game, but he's the protagonist of the first game. And you see through later on, as playing as Abby, why his death was justified. So it's not only just justified from a story standpoint, it's justified from Abby's view, and maybe later on as we see Ellie's view as well. So Joel's death it's a good thing, it's a good thing. You have to think about it. It was how I took it, as it was Obi-Wan Kenobi dying to Vader for Luke, that jumpstart Luke Skywalker when he saw his mentor be killed, then he knew that he had to do what he had to do. It was the same with Ellie. She, Luke lost the father figure in Obi-Wan Kenobi, a mentor. Same with Ellie. Ellie lost a father figure, a mentor, when Joel died. So it kicks off that journey both of them do. So that's why I think Joel's death was very, very, solid. The game, however, does suffer from pacing issues a lot. And I say this like because it's you play the first part of the game is a mix between Ellie and Abby, really. Or you play parts as Abby, but you don't really know who Abby is. And this is why I think a lot of the hate comes from understanding from Abby, and a lot of the hate like is valid with her is because Naughty Dog introduces her, but they don't really introduce her. We're just playing as some random person. That's like you, the viewer, waking up in my shoes one day. You don't know anything about my life. You don't know anything what I do, what I like, what I what I don't like, why I'm out here, what's my purpose, what's my overall goal. You don't know anything about that. And I don't know anything about that for you. And me being introduced like that as the player is very weird pacing. And how I would like them to do that or validate it is that we still played the first 2 hours of the game as Joel. We played it from Joel's point of view up until his death, and then it would switch to Ellie's, right? And then, or maybe it would switch to Abby, and then we would go to Ellie, or vice versa. It would go Abby, because the game's broken up in a part. So it's Seattle day one for Ellie, Seattle day one for Abby, Seattle, and Abby's story doesn't really cross paths with Ellie's story at all, which is very awkward to me. So it's very hard to learn like stuff about the antagonist and Abby when their stories aren't really have nothing to do with each other at all. It's kind of like he was trying to do the Pulp Fiction thing, where Pulp Fiction story is like there's multiple things happening at the same time and you're looking at certain characters' point of views, but it's very hard to understand Abby's point of view because one, she's the antagonist, two, we don't really know anything about her, and the reasons that like they make up for because of the pacing issues just don't feel right. I understand Abby's point of view as a character, but they don't feel right. But if they did it like if you started as you went as Joel died, then you played as Abby, then you switch to Ellie, and then Abby, Ellie, until it gets caught up to the point where it does. That's probably the best way of storytelling, but it doesn't. This game does a lot of emotional things in the story where it tries to make the player feel miserable. And I think that's why a lot of players didn't really sit with it well. And it just suffered a lot. This game suffers a lot, not from the story and the plot being bad, but from presentation the most. The presentation is so bad for the player to experience that's why this game gets so much hate, I believe. And that's why I give it the 6 out of 10 score, right? So the game after the death of Joel, you play as Abby, and Abby goes, or not, my bad, excuse me, play as Ellie, and Ellie goes around searching for Abby. She kills off Abby's friends, as a consequence of Abby killing Joel, and that's kind of the revenge story. But most of these deaths too only happen in cutscenes. They don't really happen they're not really boss fights or anything like that. They just happen in cutscenes, and it's kind of sad to see it like that. But that's how it works. And you kind of, as you go along, you see kind of Ellie struggle with killing, these people and Joel. And then you get caught up to the present point in time where now Abby shows up in the hotel and she's holding, Tommy hostage. And then it flashbacks all the way back to Abby. And now you're playing as Abby. And you get to see her point of view of the story. You get to see why she killed Joel, because the doctor was her father, Cool. All right. That's a valid reason, I guess. You get to see her friends, who are honestly all the side characters, because they're going to die. Even the side characters on Ellie's side are going to die. Like, they're just so meaningless. A lot of the side characters have really bad meaningless. And that's, again, just a byproduct of pacing and presentation just being bad, because like you don't care about any of the side characters. So you play as Abby. And Abby's side is like you meet some kids and who are a cult on the Seattle Washington side called like the Scars or the Seraphites, which you don't interact with as Ellie at all. You don't interact with that cult at all. You only interact with the Washington Liberation Front as Ellie. So as Abby, you interact with this cult and you're saving these kids, and her plot line is really just bad overall compared to, at least I think, again with presentation, because you're saving this kid and you're saving these kids, you're saving this little a sister and a brother, and you go through all this work to get medicine for the sister. You're turning against your own organization, and you see your friends and they're like, oh, you're my friend, but you don't know that, because you already played as Ellie, that they're basically already dead. So you're just like, oh yeah, I remember that dude, he's dead. And then you go through all this work to get medicine for the sister, and then later on she just kind of dies. She just dies to the antagonist of Abby's story, and it's very waste of time, and it feels like you wasted the player's time. And I was very bored. By this time I think the players kind of very angry with the experience that they're giving, and because of the presentation they're bored because the gameplay is not, and the design of the levels isn't very interesting, and their time feels wasted. The only time I actually felt really like nice and new refreshing was as Abby, sadly, when it was Ground Zero, when you fight the super old Rat King zombie, because that was the only new refreshing thing that they actually kind of threw at us. That was like, it was an entirely different thing. It was like, oh, this is what happens when a zombie sits down there for a really long time. This is what you get. That was new, that was refreshing, and everything else was kind of the same old. And then you get caught up as both characters, and you're now 20 ends, 10 hours as Ellie, 10 hours as Abby, and you're kind of at the last stretch of the game, and you still have to play as Abby. You beat Ellie's ass, and now you have to remember, like, this is why I'm kind of gonna end this talk on how the game presents itself, because Abby is the antagonist and you're beating the protagonist's ass, so it's hard to, like, of course Abby's the protagonist of her own story, but it's overall in the grand scope of the game, she's the antagonist of The Last of Us Part 2, where Ellie is the protagonist. That's how they portray to us in the media and the advertising, which goes back to the false advertising. I hope that when I'm just talking about this, you're seeing the entire loop. And this is, it just really goes down again to presentation. I can't stress that enough, and just how bad the presentation of this game is. So you beat Ellie's ass as Abby, and then Ellie gives up. She has a nice life with her significant other. I'm gonna go kind of fast here because this is kind of the part of the story gets really weird. She finds out that Abby is in California. She goes to finally get her full revenge after failing the first time on Abby, and she encounters this new faction that is introduced in the last part of the game, which is like the big military faction. Like, they're the only people who have masks on and bulletproof vest and everything, which is very odd to introduce in the last stretch of the game. So you deal with them. You get to the final boss fight with Abby, and she has this revelation of talking to Joel the night before he died, about how she wants to start trying to forgive him for what she did to him. And there's moments like this and scenes like this that, like, the game goes back 3 years, multiple between each of the two character storylines that are kind of nice to understand. And she just, at this point, she loses 2 fingers, so she can't play the guitar, which was her only thing kind of tying her to Joel, and she lets Abby go with the kid. And that's why, if you think of the ending as still a revenge story, it's a terrible ending. If you think of it as a journey of kindness and forgiveness, then it lessens the burden of the ending a lot. And that's kind of the summary of the story of The Last of Us Part 2. Why I think, going into why I think, again, why it was such bad presentation was because the game does multiple times, tries to get you, the player, just to kind of feel bad. Where you're playing as Abby and you're seeing you playing with your dog, and you're like, oh, the game forces you at multiple aspects to play fetch with the dog. But then as Ellie, being the survivor that she is, you kill the dog, and the game tries to make you feel sentimental and pull like very cheap emotional things like that just kind of makes the player feel bad. It makes you want to feel good for Abby and understand Abby, where Abby's presentation as a whole is just terrible to begin with. With that being said, that kind of sums up my review of The Last of Us Part 2. This is going to be a long review, as the same Final Fantasy was as well. Again, this is why I think the game deserves a 6 out of 10. It is a good game. The presentation is just off. It's just bad. Naughty Dog is a company that I think they attempted to do something that no one else has ever done. They attempted it in a very interesting genre of interactive media, and I think this time, just because the presentation was bad, they failed on it. But I'm happy that they did try an attempt for this, because I think next time, if they try and do this, they will learn from their mistakes and know what to do. I think where they failed the most was just the advertising. They should have told us about Abby. They just should have presented her more and better, and just the pacing overall, because this is an interactive media, and you want your players, if you want your players to feel something and emotional, there's better ways to do it than the ways that they do it like this. My example is, for example, Steins Gate. If you've ever seen Steins Gate, it's a time travel visual novel, and it's also an anime that I watched, and it's fantastic. But through you really, as a viewer, you feel the struggles of Okabe's time travel, as he time travels over and over again to save his childhood friend 1,000 times, as he time travels backwards, from a 20-35 years, just to get back to save his lover. We see and we feel his struggle as a viewer, and that's what they needed to do. Same with Code Geass, one of the most classic animes of all time. I'm going to give anime examples because they're really well at doing this. Bush decided to, when he told his sister to kill all the Japanese by accident, we felt that weight of the world on him, and when he did that, when Kira lost in Death Note, we felt that. Those are moments and times where the writing themselves are just there, and they show the emotion in the characters that the viewer and the audience can do as well. And The Last of Us Part 2 tries to do this and can do it more successfully because it is an interactive media, but fails because of just how cheap and the tricks are. So anyway, that's going to be my review. 6 out of 10. I definitely think it's still worth picking up. I would love to hear your opinions on the game. There's a lot of mixed opinions on the game that are very interesting to hear, but those are mine. I hope this helps your decision and what you thought of The Last of Us Part 2, because it is a very interesting attempt at what they were trying to do. I'm not entirely sure what they were trying to do. Either they were trying to make the player feel bad or sentimental, but it is a interesting attempt. And I really do think that if you go into the game thinking if it's a revenge story, it's going to be a harder experience than it actually is if you think of it as forgiveness. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of It's Not a Sport. I hope you enjoyed our talk about The Last of Us Part 2. I hope you pick up the game. It's still a good game, of course. It has a lot of flaws, and they attempted something very difficult, but it was a good game, and that's why I gave it a score of 6 out of 10. Make sure to leave a comment and a like down below. You can listen to all of our previous shows and see the video recording of me where I show up on the screen, things that I talk about on our YouTube channel. If you want to listen to the podcast, you can listen to it on SoundCloud, Spotify, iTunes, or Google Podcasts. Make sure to check out our website, itsnotasport.com. And as always, follow us on Instagram, It's Not a Sport to You, for updates and cool artworks and things that we're doing at It's Not a Sport. This is your host, Salty Waffles, signing off, and I hope you guys are having a wonderful climb.